She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She didn't even look angry. That might have been the worst part. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had come home late from a work meeting, and the house was quieter than usual. I found her sitting at the kitchen table with a half-finished cup of chamomile tea. She looked tired, not in the way people do after a long day, but in the way someone looks when they've been holding something in for too long. I was halfway through telling her about a printer jam at the office when she cut me off gently with a sigh. "Carter, I think I need some space." That's all she said. Calm. Almost practiced. As if she'd rehearsed it, maybe in the mirror, maybe in her mind 100 times over. And I, fool that I am, nodded like I understood. Like I had any idea what she meant. I remember smiling. Even. "Sure. Do you want to go see your sister for a few days?" She shook her head. "No," she said. "I mean space from us." That made my chest tighten in a way I didn't expect. I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there, trying to figure out what I'd done, what I'd missed. Our anniversary was 3 weeks ago. I got her flowers. We had dinner at her favorite place. She laughed that night, really laughed. Or maybe I only thought she did. "Okay," I said. It was the only thing I could think to say. I didn't protest. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even ask what the hell space really meant. I just stepped back. I stopped reaching for her in bed. Stopped texting her during the day. I gave her the space she asked for, thinking maybe she needed a little time to breathe. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe we'd just grown a little tired, and she needed to reset. I believed that. I needed to believe that. But space has a strange way of becoming distance, and distance has a way of turning permanent when you don't close it fast enough. In the days that followed, we moved through the house like polite strangers. The kind who smile softly when they pass but never ask how the other's doing. I made coffee for 2 out of habit, and she started leaving early, before I'd even finished brushing my teeth. I noticed little things first. Her phone stayed face down. Her laughter sounded different. She started playing music while getting ready, something she used to only do when we first started dating. One morning I caught myself watching her dance in front of the mirror, and for a split second, I saw someone I didn't recognize. Someone free. Someone lighter. And I started wondering, what if the space wasn't about finding herself, but escaping me? Still, I didn't ask. I didn't want to come off controlling. I didn't want to be the guy who panics the minute his wife needs breathing room. I kept reminding myself, this is temporary. She'll come back. We'll talk. We'll be fine. But the silence was stretching longer. And every day, I felt myself slipping further from her world, like a book she once loved but had outgrown. The kind you keep on the shelf but never open again. Then came the morning I realized, maybe she wasn't coming back at all. But by the time I finally understood what she really meant that night, by the time I reached for her, hoping we could talk, something had already changed in her eyes. And soon, I'd find out just how far that distance had taken her, and how far behind I'd been left without ever realizing it. I started waking up before my alarm. Not because I had anywhere to be, but because my mind refused to rest. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling in the half-dark, waiting to hear the front door click shut, confirming once again that Dana had left before I could say good morning. At first, I told myself it was just her way of clearing her head. She used to go on morning walks when she was anxious. But this didn't feel like that. There was no casual "be back soon" note. No half-empty coffee mug on the counter. No sign she had ever been there at all. It was like she had mastered the art of slipping in and out of our shared life without leaving a trace. That's when the silence became more than just quiet. It became strategy. Her avoidance wasn't accidental. It was measured, deliberate. Every unanswered question, every missed dinner, every door she closed gently behind her, it wasn't space anymore. It was retreat. I had no idea what I'd done to become someone she had to retreat from. Still, I didn't push. And I don't say that to sound noble. I just didn't know how to reach her anymore. Every time I considered asking her what she was really feeling, I'd hesitate. Not because I didn't want the truth, but because I wasn't sure she owed me an explanation anymore. That's what marriage felt like now, an agreement made in a different language, one we both forgot how to speak. She had a habit of humming to herself when doing the laundry. It was one of those unconscious things she did for years, little fragments of songs stuck in her head, soft and almost tuneless. I realized one night I hadn't heard her hum in over a month. That hit me harder than it should have. It meant she wasn't relaxed here anymore. The comfort was gone, and I didn't know how to get it back. We had this photo on the living room shelf, one from our 3rd anniversary. We'd gone to this quiet cabin in Vermont, just the two of us. No signal, no distractions, just books, firewood, and snow. In that photo, she's wearing this ridiculous knit beanie I bought her from a gas station, and she's laughing with her whole face, eyes closed, nose wrinkled. The kind of laugh that makes people fall in love. I used to look at that photo and smile. Now, I avoided it like it was evidence in a case I couldn't solve. One night, after she went to bed, the master bedroom, of course, not the guest room where I'd quietly relocated, I stood in the hallway staring at our closed door. My hand hovered over the knob. Not to open it, just to feel something. A pulse. A sign. Maybe she'd hear me out there and come talk to me. Maybe we'd sit on the floor and finally let the silence break. But nothing happened. She didn't stir. And I went back downstairs, more alone than I'd felt in years. That same week, she left her laptop open on the dining table. I wasn't snooping. I swear. I was cleaning up after myself, trying not to make a mess in a home that already felt too fragile. But there it was, an open email draft. No name. No subject. Just a few lines typed out, then deleted, then typed again. I don't know how to tell him. He gave me space, and I used it to drift away. I wish he'd noticed earlier. I wish I'd said something sooner. She never sent it. Maybe she never meant to. But those sentences haunted me more than anything she could have said out loud. I stood there, reading and rereading, wondering which part hurt more, the drifting, or the fact that she wished I had noticed it before she did. It was strange, feeling heartbroken over something that hadn't officially ended. We weren't divorced. We hadn't even fought. We were just unraveling. Quietly. Invisibly. Like a thread slipping through fingers that are too numb to hold on anymore. I didn't confront her about the email. I didn't print it or memorize it or use it against her. I just closed the laptop. Slowly. Respectfully. Like I was tucking away a truth that neither of us was ready to face. And even then, some small, naive part of me still believed she'd turn around. That she'd walk through the door one day, sit across from me like she used to, and say, "I'm sorry. I lost myself for a while. But I missed you." What I didn't realize was that moment had already passed. Quietly. Somewhere between her silence and my hesitation, we'd crossed a line we couldn't come back from. And the worst part? I had no idea what came next. There's something eerie about brushing your teeth beside someone who feels miles away. You're close enough to hear the water dripping from their toothbrush, smell their shampoo, even catch their reflection, but it's like they've forgotten you're sharing a mirror. That's what it became with Dana. She didn't flinch when I entered the bathroom. Didn't smile, didn't acknowledge me. Just kept her gaze fixed on the sink like it held some unspoken answer. I wanted to say something. Anything. But what was there left to say when your wife no longer looks at you like someone who matters? At some point, the conversations that used to carry us late into the night faded into logistical exchanges. Are you using the car tomorrow? Can you sign the insurance renewal? There's leftovers in the fridge. Like we were coworkers managing a shared apartment instead of partners who once whispered across pillows and shared plans for imaginary children. I noticed she stopped saying my name, even that felt loud in its absence. The way she'd just start talking without looking up, expecting I'd know she meant me, it made me feel invisible. Not hated, not unloved, just unnecessary. I started spending more time outside the house. Not because I had anywhere specific to go, but because the quiet inside had begun to press in on me. I'd take the long route home from work. Stop for coffee I didn't want. Sit in parking lots pretending to check emails, just to avoid going back to a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. And yet, I kept hoping, ridiculously, that if I gave her just a little more time, she'd somehow come back to me. I didn't want to crowd her. I didn't want to force something. But it was killing me, the waiting. She started wearing new perfume. A floral one. Not the warm, vanilla scent I used to bury my face into when she hugged me after a long day. And she'd wear it even on days when she didn't go to work. When she'd leave late in the evening, saying she was meeting a friend from the old neighborhood. I asked who once casually. She said, "Oh, just someone from high school," and changed the subject like it was nothing. I should have asked more questions. I should have looked harder. But I was afraid. Afraid that naming it would make it real. That if I put her actions into words, if I said out loud what I feared was happening, I'd break the spell entirely. And maybe some part of me believed the lie was easier to live with than the truth. What people don't tell you is that when someone starts pulling away, it's not always with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes, it's in the smallest things. The way they sit a little further on the couch. The way they keep their phone screen tilted just enough to hide it from view. The way they laugh a little too hard at something someone else texted them. or the way they stop asking how your day was and start treating your presence as background noise. One night I came home, and she wasn't there. No note. No message. Just absence. I sat on the couch and waited. Kept the lights off. It was nearly 11:30 when I heard the key in the door. She stepped in like she'd done it 100 times before, didn't even look surprised to see me. She was dressed too nicely for just dinner, and there was that scent again, that too sweet perfume that didn't belong to the woman I married. I asked her, very calmly, "Did you have a good night?" She paused, just for a second, enough to make me think maybe she felt the weight of the moment. Maybe she saw the look in my eyes and remembered who we used to be. But then she smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, just superficially. It was fine, and that was it. She walked past me, took off her shoes, and went upstairs. I listened to her footsteps, slow and deliberate, and something inside me finally gave way. Not anger, not even sadness, just the realization that I was waiting for someone who had already left. Maybe not physically, not yet, but in all the ways that mattered. She was already gone. Still, I wasn't ready to admit it. Not to myself. Not out loud. Because if I said it, then I'd have to stop waiting. And I didn't know who I was without the waiting. People like to think heartbreak happens suddenly, that there's a dramatic moment where something snaps and you're left standing in the wreckage, knowing exactly when everything changed. But that's not how it went for me. For me, the real pain came in staying. Staying too long in a life that no longer recognized me. Staying quiet when the silence had already become a language of its own. Staying loyal to a version of us that no longer existed. Hoping that if I was just patient enough, maybe she'd circle back and remember who we were. But the truth is, you can't wait someone back into loving you. I learned that the hard way. There was this morning, early March, when the weather hadn't decided what it wanted to be. The windows were fogged from the inside, and I stood barefoot in the kitchen staring at the condensation, trying to find patterns in the mess. Dana came down the stairs humming softly, a tune I didn't recognize, and walked right past me. She poured herself coffee, not offering me any, then sat by the window with her phone and started scrolling. I watched her for a long time. She wasn't angry. She wasn't cold. She was just elsewhere. Her eyes looked rested, peaceful even, like she'd been sleeping better lately. Meanwhile, I was a ghost floating through our home, more decoration than presence. I spent most of that week analyzing everything. The way she'd smile when texting someone, the way she'd check the mirror twice before heading out, the way her voice changed slightly when she picked up a call in another room. And I kept telling myself I was overthinking, that people change, that maybe she was just in a phase. Maybe I was the problem for expecting her to stay exactly the same. But that wasn't it. It wasn't that she'd changed, it was that she'd already moved on, and I was still here, flipping through the old pages as if the story was unfinished. One night, I made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta, garlic bread, the usual. I lit a candle. Not for romance. Just to make the place feel warm again. She came home late, said she had drinks with coworkers. I watched her eye the table, the candle, the food. She gave me this small, polite smile and said, "You didn't have to." Then she ate silently, phone by her side, screen lighting up every few minutes. I asked how her day was. She said, "Long." I nodded. That was the end of that. After dinner, she went upstairs and I sat there in the kitchen, staring at the empty seat across from me. That chair used to carry laughter, arguments, long conversations about the future. Now it was just furniture. I rinsed the dishes, threw away the leftover bread. I stood at the sink longer than necessary, just letting the water run. Somewhere in that moment, I stopped hoping for a spark. That maybe was the shift, not some grand discovery, not some betrayal I could point at, just the quiet resignation that I wasn't waiting for her to come back anymore. I was waiting for myself. For the part of me that used to feel joy without needing her approval. For the version of me that didn't count my worth in glances or text responses or whether she laughed at something I said. The hardest part wasn't that she pulled away. It was how natural it became for me to let her. I adjusted, slowly, without even realizing it. I stopped sharing little wins from my day. I stopped mentioning things I thought she'd care about. I stopped asking if she wanted to go for walks. I stopped making playlists for long drives. Somewhere in between those choices, I disappeared from my own marriage. And yet, I didn't leave. I couldn't. Not yet. Because despite everything, there was still this small, irrational part of me that clung to the idea that she was just lost. That maybe if I stayed long enough, showed up enough, forgave enough, she'd remember. But the truth was, she didn't forget. She'd just outgrown the version of us that I was still fighting to protect. And in that gap between who she became and who I was still trying to be, I started to understand. Space isn't always physical. Sometimes it's emotional, unspoken, stretched out across dinner tables and Sunday mornings, woven through glances that don't land and touch that no longer reaches. And by the time someone asks for space, chances are, they've already taken it. It's strange how often I think of the quiet moments now. Not the dramatic ones. Not the night she said she needed space, or the first time she came home late and didn't explain. Not even the heavy silences over dinner. No, what stays with me are the tiny, invisible shifts. The way her voice used to rise just slightly when she said my name, like she was happy to see me. The way her laugh used to come out effortlessly when we were on the couch watching something stupid. The way she used to look at me like I was still the person she chose, not someone she was stuck with. Those were the pieces I held on to, even when everything else had started slipping away. People think you can pinpoint the moment a relationship ends. But I've come to believe it ends in fractions, imperceptible at first, then obvious only in hindsight. Like how she stopped sending me articles during the day, the ones she used to say reminded her of me. Or how I stopped saving funny things to tell her, because eventually I realized she wasn't really listening anymore. She'd nod, offer a vague smile, but I could see her eyes somewhere else, in another room, another life, maybe with someone who made her laugh the way I used to. And the scariest part? I didn't even resent her for it. I remember folding laundry one Saturday while she was out. I found a shirt I didn't recognize, not mine, not hers. Neutral color, plain design. It smelled faintly like cologne. I stood there holding it longer than I should have, waiting for the wave of betrayal to hit me. But all I felt was quiet. Not numbness, not shock. Just a confirmation of what I already knew but hadn't said aloud. I placed the shirt on the stack and didn't bring it up. Not because I didn't care. Because I was tired of asking questions I already had answers to. That night, I lay in bed, the guest bed, the one I'd moved into by silent agreement, and listened to the sound of her moving around upstairs. The floor creaked under her steps, familiar and distant at the same time. At one point, she paused. I imagined her standing by our bedroom window, maybe looking out into the backyard where we used to have coffee together on weekends. Maybe she was thinking about what we used to be. Or maybe she was just texting someone else. I'll never know. That's the part that tears you apart the slowest, not knowing what they're thinking, only that you're no longer the one they tell it to. I used to believe that love was something you fought for. That if things started to break, you glued them back together. You sat down, you talked, you listened, and eventually, you found your way back. But I've learned that sometimes the fight itself becomes one-sided. You try, and try, and try until trying becomes your entire identity. And they look at you with those eyes that say they're already somewhere else, and it makes you wonder if maybe love isn't about holding on, but knowing when to stop chasing someone who stopped walking toward you a long time ago. What I hadn't expected was how ordinary it would all feel. I thought the end of something this deep would come with drama, with tears, with raised voices and slammed doors. But it didn't. It came with a drawer she cleared out without a word. A night she didn't come home, and I didn't ask why. A coffee cup that stayed clean because I didn't bother making two anymore. That's how it ended. Not with anger, with indifference. And the cruelest part? I still loved her. Not blindly, not in a way that ignored who she had become, but in the quiet way you love someone who shaped your history, even if they don't belong in your future. So I kept showing up. Watered the plants. Paid the bills. Washed the sheets. Waited for the moment she might look at me again and remember. But deep down, I knew. What she needed wasn't space. It was distance. What she wanted wasn't time. It was permission to leave without having to say the words. But I never gave her that permission. I just kept fading a little more each day, until one of us would finally break the silence. And I think we both knew, eventually, that someone would. It's a strange thing, realizing you're still living in the same house but no longer living in the same story. You pass each other in hallways, share a roof, sleep under the same night sky, but the air between you is heavy with things unsaid. And worse than that is how normal it begins to feel. How easily silence settles in. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It just takes its place beside you like an old acquaintance, and before you know it, you stop noticing how empty everything has become. There was a morning not long ago, and I don't say this lightly, where I forgot who I was for a few seconds. I stood at the sink shaving, watching the blade move across my face like I'd seen it done 1,000 times, and suddenly the man in the mirror didn't look familiar. He looked tired. Not in the physical sense, though that was true, too, but in the deeper way. Tired of waiting. Tired of wondering. Tired of being quiet in his own life. I didn't recognize the eyes. They looked older, distant, like they had seen something that hadn't been spoken aloud. And maybe that's what love turns into when it breaks slowly. Not pain. Not betrayal. Just unfamiliarity. You wake up one day and realize the person you built your life around has turned into someone you used to know. And then, if you're not careful, you start turning into someone you used to know. I started noticing I wasn't laughing anymore. Not even quietly. The radio became background noise. Books didn't hold my focus. My phone sat untouched for hours, and I found myself scrolling through old photos not to feel nostalgic, but to try and remember what being me used to feel like. There's one photo, blurry, taken on a trip to Santa Fe years ago, where I'm sitting on a bench, squinting into the sun, laughing at something Dana had just said. I stared at it for a long time last week, trying to remember the joke. I couldn't, but I remembered the way she used to look at me when I laughed. Back then, there was warmth in her gaze. These days, there's only absence. We never had the talk. Not really. She never sat me down and said it out loud. And maybe that's what made it harder. There was no closure, no final chapter. Just a slow drift into different lives, still wearing the same rings, still sleeping in the same house, like two actors who forgot their lines and just kept standing on stage, hoping the curtain would fall on its own. I sometimes wonder if she feels the same way. If she lies awake at night thinking about who we used to be. If she ever looks at me and sees the man who used to make her laugh until she cried. Or maybe, and this is what scares me most, maybe she already grieved the end of us while I was still pretending we were fine. Maybe she went through all the emotions, sadness, guilt, confusion, quietly, alone, while I was still setting the table for two. And I'll admit something I haven't said to anyone, not even myself until now. I'm not angry at her. I can't be. Because what we lost wasn't the result of cruelty. It was erosion. Slow, gentle, patient erosion, the kind that wears down rock without ever making a sound. But even without anger, there's still grief. And grief is its own language, one that doesn't care if you're ready or if it makes sense. It just arrives. Sometimes in the middle of the night. Sometimes while folding laundry. Sometimes when a stranger on the radio says something that feels too familiar. Grief doesn't knock. It just sits down next to you and waits. That's where I've been lately. Sitting with it. Not fighting it. Not naming it. Just letting it be. Letting myself miss what we were without forcing a return. Letting her take the space she asked for without hoping she'll come back. And, maybe hardest of all, letting myself believe that I can still be whole even after losing something I never thought I could live without. Because maybe that's what healing is. Not forgetting. Not fixing. Just remembering who you were before everything got quiet and trusting that somewhere beneath the silence, that version of you still exists. There was a Sunday, late afternoon, sky starting to bleed into gold, soft enough to make even the ugliest moments look tender, and I was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee that had gone cold in my hands. I watched Dana step into her car, sunglasses on, hair pulled back, dressed like she was meeting someone she wanted to impress. She didn't tell me where she was going, and I didn't ask. That was our ritual now. A silent agreement that curiosity had lost its place in this house. But something about that moment stayed with me. The door didn't slam. The engine didn't roar. It was all so gentle, so casual, so normal. Like watching someone leave work for the day, not a wife leaving her husband. And yet, something inside me felt like it had broken. Not loudly. Not violently. Just broken, like a thread quietly snapping after being stretched too far for too long. There's this myth that endings come with clarity. But I've learned that some of them come like fog. Soft. Creeping. Familiar enough that you don't realize you're lost in it until the path disappears behind you. And once it's gone, there's no trail back. You don't notice the last smile. You don't remember the final time she reached for your hand. You're too busy believing there will be more touches, more questions, more apologies. But that's not how it ends. It ends in the ordinary. I think about that more than I care to admit. The idea that you can be in the presence of someone's exit long before they physically leave. That they can begin removing themselves piece by piece, first their laughter, then their attention, then their tenderness, until all that's left is the shape of them, going through motions, waiting for the right moment to not return. And still, I stayed. I stayed in the house we picked out together. I watered the plants she stopped noticing. I folded laundry she no longer thanked me for. I made dinners for two, even though she rarely ate with me anymore. I lit candles like they could somehow bring warmth back to a room that hadn't held it in months. Not because I believed it would fix anything, but because I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't ready to be the one who left first. And here's the truth I've never said aloud. I was terrified of being alone, not in the physical sense. I've been physically alone for months now, but in the way that you realize you've wrapped so much of your identity around someone else that when they stop seeing you, you stop seeing yourself. It's not just the absence of love. It's the absence of reflection. Who am I without the version of me she used to recognize? I tried to be patient, to be kind, to be present. But I began to see that love, real love, isn't about patience alone. It's about mutual presence. And when someone mentally and emotionally checks out, your patience becomes a waiting room with no appointments. I was still showing up for a connection that had already disconnected. Hoping. Always hoping. But hope without participation becomes delusion. And I had to face that. One night, I stood outside our bedroom, her bedroom now, and heard her on the phone. I didn't eavesdrop. I didn't press my ear to the wood. I just stood there, knowing the voice she was speaking to wasn't mine. Knowing the softness in her tone hadn't been used on me in months. And I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel jealous. What I felt was erased. Like a name slowly fading off a chalkboard after too many rains. That was the night I realized something important. You don't need betrayal to feel broken. You just need to stop being chosen. And I hadn't been chosen in a long time. But I also realized something else. Staying isn't always strength. Sometimes, it's fear wearing a costume. And I was done pretending. I didn't leave that night. I wasn't ready yet. But for the first time, I started imagining what leaving could look like, not as an escape, not as punishment, but as an act of self-respect. The gentle kind. The kind that says, I matter, too. She doesn't know it yet. But I've started packing, not my things, not yet, but my thoughts, my boundaries, my sense of worth. I'm gathering the parts of myself I gave up too quietly. The ones I now understand were never hers to keep. And when I go, not if, but when, it won't be dramatic. It won't be loud. It will be soft, like hers was. But this time, it will be mine. I didn't leave on a stormy night. There were no bags at the door. No final argument. No dramatic confession or tearful goodbye. Just a morning like any other, cool and quiet, the sun filtering through the curtains in soft patches. I remember pouring my coffee and realizing, as I stirred in the cream, that I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't waiting. I wasn't rehearsing anything in my head. I just knew. She came downstairs late, still in her robe, scrolling through her phone. She said good morning the way a neighbor might, not a wife. I looked at her and felt no hatred, no bitterness. Just a calm understanding that we were already living separate lives and had been for a long time. I wasn't angry about it anymore. In a strange way, I was grateful. Grateful for the years that shaped me. Grateful that I loved so deeply, even if it ended differently than I hoped. Grateful that I now understood the kind of presence I wanted and the kind I deserved. She asked if I needed the car that afternoon. I said no. She nodded and walked away, unaware that I had already decided this would be my last morning here. I didn't pack much. Just a few clothes, some books, and a photo I took from that trip to Santa Fe, the one where I was laughing on the bench. Not because I missed her, but because I missed me in that photo. The version of me who laughed easily, who felt seen, who hadn't yet learned to shrink just to make someone else comfortable. I left a short note. Nothing dramatic. Just, I loved you fully. But I need to love myself now too. And I meant it. Every word. That first night alone in the new place was quieter than I expected. No scent of her perfume. No creak of her footsteps above. Just silence, the real kind. But it didn't feel empty. It felt open. Like space that finally belonged to me. Like her after holding your breath for too long. In the weeks that followed, I started remembering myself. I took long walks. I cooked for one, but with care. I called friends I'd slowly lost touch with. I picked up books I hadn't finished. I even caught myself laughing, really laughing, at a random joke on a podcast, and it felt like hearing an old song I used to love but forgot existed. She reached out once. Just a message, hope you're okay. I stared at it for a while. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I no longer needed to say anything. I was okay. Better than okay. I was becoming whole again, not because of anyone else, but because I'd stopped asking to be chosen and started choosing myself. Healing didn't come all at once. Some mornings still felt heavy. Some memories still knocked on the door uninvited. But I let them pass through, gently, without shame. That's what healing really is, not erasing the past, but making peace with the fact that it's no longer your future. I don't regret loving her. I don't regret staying as long as I did. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is stay long enough to know, without question, that it's time to go. And now, for the first time in years, I don't wake up bracing for distance. I wake up with clarity, with sunlight on my face, with the sound of a world that no longer waits on someone else's mood. I make my own coffee. I take up all the space I used to shrink from. And when I look in the mirror now, I finally see someone I know again. Someone I trust. Someone free.